Behold my strength
presents Fanfic Drama Theater, bringing you the absolute pinnacle of internet fanfiction since 2008. Now please give a big warm welcome to your host, me! Thank you all once again. Now, on today's episode, we're going to take up the exciting conclusion of Hot and Cold. Of course, this is brought to us by our good friends on fanfiction.net. Unleash your imagination. Now, last we left off with Chapter 1, it's time for the exciting conclusion, Chapter 2 of Hot and Cold by the author, Junkyosha no Tamashi. How will it ever end? I am on the edge of my seat. Before we begin Chapter 2, we have yet another author's note for this new chapter. Let us dive in and then we will get to the real meat and potatoes as we conclude Hot and Cold. Brace for fluffiness, angst, and tragedy. Also, Under Armour in this chapter and beyond does not mean the brand of clothing. It means the thinner, skin-tight armor on the Reploids, i.e. Zero's black legs, upper arms, etc. Also, this chapter's more Zero x Levy than anything else, and CL and crew don't get a big spotlight this time. They'll get a large bit next chapter, and you should be able to guess why when you read this one. Enjoy. A loud rumbling ran in Leviathan's head as she slowly drifted into consciousness. Her eyes cracked open, only to shut tightly at the sudden bright light around her. Adjusting, she reached for her head, groaning slightly at the pain. Her fingers met a soft mass of long azure strands. Her blue eyes widened as she realized something that threw her for a loop completely. Her helmet was missing. Looking down at her body, she noticed that a lot of her armor was gone. Strangely enough, the guards around her chest and lower abdomen were the only pieces remaining. She, for the most part, was extremely vulnerable and utterly defenseless in her light blue under armor and no weapon. So we're going to take this turn, are we, Mr. Fanfic? Okay, here we go. Fuck it, let's go. A small wave of panic took her. Where the fuck was her equipment? Wow, it's like the first curse word this guy's actually used. Bravo. Had she taken so much damage that they were destroyed? Or had someone taken them from her? And if that were the case, then who? Rising quickly out of what she soon realized to be a maintenance bed, she was greeted by a strong dizzy spell. Pitching forward, she braced for the impact and expected the thud to be quite excruciating on her already sore body. What she did not expect, however, were the rush of footsteps across the metal floor, or the strong arms catching her mid-fall, or the broad chest her head fell against. Her rescuer was a blur as she looked up to see them, the vertigo not yet past. Slowly the figure came into clearer view, and she gasped softly when the defining red helmet identified her savior. Zero. You're awake, he said, his voice flat and his eyes gauging her carefully. When she did nothing but look at him further, he relaxed slightly, a small smile appearing on his face. Good. He gently released her, helping her steadily to her feet so as to avoid another fall. When she managed to stand on her own, he watched as she looked around, taking in her surroundings. The room was sparse, a large metal cabinet in the corner, a few more beds, a desk, and various maintenance and medical apparatuses strewn about. She noticed her helmet and armor lying on the table behind Zero, with repair tools near them. So that's what happened to them. How do you feel? Her gaze was drawn to him again, and he did not miss the faint blush that set across her pretty face as she cross-examined him with the utmost scrutiny. Whether she was determining his sincerity or deciding what to do with him, he couldn't tell. I feel okay, I guess. Fairy said, eyeing the room again. I can't remember anything that's happened, though. Zero nodded. It happens when a situation gets too stressful, he said knowingly, his hand finding its way to her shoulder. Why was his thumb brushing against it so softly? Don't worry, it'll come back to you in time, he continued, not wanting to tell her how he found her until her memory returned. Shocking her into remembering would be a disaster, especially when he informed her about Harpuya's unfortunate death. Where are we? She asked, beginning to pace the onboard laboratory. The old Repliforce ship inside your temple. She whirled around to look him in the face, her gaze hard. Why? She demanded, and Zero knew he couldn't keep the truth from her with her tenacity. The temple was demolished, he stated calmly, though his mind was racing. And I found you in the wreckage while searching for other survivors. The way out collapsed, and this was the only safe place to go. As if on cue, a large rumble echoed from outside the ship. Whirs of sound and color were shaping in Leviathan's mind. Bits and pieces of the events in question. A shout here, a mumble there, a horrible chorus of screams. That one was the most prominent. And it was drowned out by a dreadful screech of raw power. Wow. Fucking Stephen King, motherfucker, I hope you're taking notes on this shit. Why did it collapse? I can't remember. Zero, tell me, she exclaimed, exasperated at her amnesia and wanting answers now. The Crimson Fighter moved beside her, choosing his next words carefully. Ragnarok fired on Neo Arcadia and wiped most of it out. Well, okay, I guess the blunt approach is always the best. As she gasped in horror, a rush of thought hit her and she remembered everything as though Ragnarok was the cue word to return her memories. I remember now. Her head bowed and she began to shake. Now she wished she hadn't remembered. Zero noticed this and shifted to face her, his voice laden with worry. Leviathan, what's wrong? She looked up at him then, her cerulean eyes watery and her face flushing. Wow, this guy's diction is rather spotty. I can't figure this out. Fafnir, in the blast, she croaked. Or excuse me, Fafnir, in the blast, she croaked. Unable to say the word, she couldn't, not her brother. Zero looked on in horror as she began to recount the second death he had made her experience. We were evacuating the citizens. He went to check the capital. Then there was this bright light. Her normally perky voice trembled with the insurmountable sorrow she was ripping through, and each pained syllable Zero heard like a punch to the gut. He couldn't even begin to know what news of Harpuya would do to her. And then everyone was screaming, she mumbled, wrapping her arms around herself and shuddering as if from a terrible nightmare. Oh God, the screams! Oh, Zero, they were horrible. Just horrible. She looked up at him suddenly, a look of wanton hope on her teary face. Have you heard from Harpuya? Is he all right? Zero sighed heavily. His dark eyes glittering with sorrow as he remorsefully shook his head, watching her face fall as he told her what had happened. He used his last breath to tell me where you were trapped. There wasn't anything I could have done in time to save him. Leviathan looked like she was on the verge of utter despair. She slumped to the floor slowly, her small sniffles getting louder as the metallic floor became stained with crystal teardrops. A look of regret and shame tore across his face as he watched her revel in her anguish that he himself had caused by his inability to stop the blast. Abandoning his usual bravado, Zero surprised her by swiftly kneeling and pulling her to him in a warm and strangely comforting hug. Her enemy and her rival held her in his arms, and she had to fight the urge to just melt into him. Why was she feeling this way? I'm sorry, he said after a moment, his hands clutching at her shoulders regretfully. I failed to stop Kraft in time. It's my fault. They're both dead because of me. They died dishonorably because of my failure. His voice was as anguished and spiteful as she had ever heard from him, and it scared her because all the resentment was reserved for himself. He gripped her tighter as he spoke, and her breathing hitched ever so slightly the closer to him he pulled her. Breathing became difficult as familiar, but bizarre warmth spread throughout Leviathan's body. She didn't usually feel like this unless she was fighting him. No, it couldn't be. Not. Wow, I think we're about to get into the X-rated version of the fanfic. Prepare. Slender fingers pressed against Zero's back as she returned his embrace, venting her pain and anger as she sobbed into his chest, his hands stroking her dark blue hair lightly. He fought back a few tears of his own. He hated seeing her like this, and even more so since he was the one to blame to begin with. He felt her shift, pulling her head back to look at him. He struggled not to gasp when her face moved to only a few inches from his, and his eyes went straight to her lips as she began to speak. Zero, she said, her voice startlingly level considering she was just crying heavily. Where do I stand in your eye? What? Blinking confusedly at the offbeat question. No shit, really. He could only voice his misperception. What do you mean? She shifted again, her demeanor indicating that she was obviously a little uncomfortable with whatever she was about to say. He began to feel anxious. Well, you blame yourself for Fafnir dying, she said, struggling to say the word and appearing relieved once she did. And you honored Harpuya's last wish. Both of them and myself have tried time and again to kill you, but you don't hate us for it, or do damage to us in any fights any more than is necessary. Since you just told me how you feel about them, I was wondering. She squirmed again, noticeably embarrassed by her question. Well, that makes two of us. Zero noticed newfound difficulty breathing as he anticipated her worded query. What are your feelings about me? She said at last. The teary flush replaced by a deep blush, tinting her ivory cheeks a rich scarlet. The fact that they were still, despite prior circumstances, in each other's arms didn't help the question's awkwardness any. Leviathan almost giggled, because once she asked him, Zero turned a red that could rival his armor in hue. His mouth opened and closed a few times. Clearly he was searching for the right words to say. Finally he spoke, and Fairy almost stopped breathing solely in anticipation of what he would say. Leviathan, how convenient. XXXXX. I think that could probably sum up the rest of this, but fuck it. We started this motherfucker, we're gonna finish it, people. Let's continue. Sunlight peeking from under the door greeted the wary CL when she opened her eyes in a dark room. Sitting up hurriedly, she discovered she was in her own room, and the sunlight told her that it was morning. She must have been so exhausted from the previous day that when she fainted, she fell asleep completely. She heard a metal hiss. Feel any better? She glanced over to see Nij in the doorway. CL wasted no time with pleasantries. Did they find anything? Sighing, Nij had expected as much bluntness from her. She walked forward to sit beside CL on her bed. Don't go crazy, CL, but... she said, worrying the scientist with the apparent implication. They found a very faint reading under the rubble. CL was silent. She blinked several times in succession, her mind reeling to figure this out. He's alive. If they found his reading, she said, jumping to her feet, then they need to send a search party out after him. They need to clear the debris and get a repair unit, and... I told you not to freak out, Nij said, chuckling as she did so. Oh, excuse me. I told you not to freak out, Nij said, chuckling as she did so. CL's confused look warranted further explanation. We already took care of all that. We sent them out an hour or so ago. They're en route there now. A renewed look of hope grew on her face, and Nij heard a faint whisper before she dashed out the door. Thank you. Leviathan, Her breathing became shallower, and she was beginning to slightly tremble. She made no attempt to hide her anxiety. You make me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. A rush of red and blue, a lovely smile, and long brown hair came to his mind. You understand me, why I fight, and he began to shift awkwardly himself, earning a suppressed giggle from Leviathan. He looked at her face, and seeing her parted lips, the hope in her deep blue eyes, only one thought crossed them. To hell with it. He moved forward, pulling her closer to him, capturing her lips with his own as his tense shoulders fell in long-awaited release. Her gasp did not surprise him, nor did her light moan as she kissed him back. She had always been a flirt towards him, and he knew she harbored some feelings for him. But it seemed that he had underestimated the intensity of those feelings as she gripped him tighter, kissed him harder. Oh, Lord. He felt her hand shift to his face, pulling him closer to her, then cool metal against his back, cracking his eyes open. He saw that he was on the floor and Fairy over him. Oh, Lord. Her eyes shut and a look of peace on her face that he had not seen before. He would have smiled had his mouth not been so preoccupied. Oh, that's classy. He had truly made her happy in a way that didn't involve his sword in her throat. You know, there's some jokes that could be made about that, but that's like fanfic level humor, and we're getting enough of that shit already, so let's just skip on here. Actually, I don't think she was ever this happy during our fights. She stopped, breaking away both to breathe and to see Zero's reaction. Instead of the wondrously baffled boyish face she had been expecting, she saw a warm tenderness in his eyes and in his demeanor, and she definitely preferred that over the comical confusion. His hand moved from the small of her back to her face, cupping her cheek gently as a happy smile grew on his face. His voice was the softest velvet when he spoke again. Does that answer your question? Oh my god, I can't do this. He asked, a bemused smirk appearing ever so slightly. Smiling, she leaned forward for another kiss, pulling away quickly before Zero could really enjoy it. She hovered her lips just a millimeter above his, her own voice playful, yet so achingly inviting. "I'm not sure, Zero," she teased, earning a low but amused growl from the Crimson Swordsman. "I think I'll need some more convincing after that." Ugh. He chuckled, lifting his head to meet her. She moved to pull further back, but a strong hand pushed her lips to his again, and made no effort to refuse him. Fairy slid his sleek helmet off, her slender fingers wrapping themselves in his dazzling golden locks. His own hands ghosted over her thighs, the situation escalating far more quickly than either had imagined. Neither seemed to care, though, as they continued to lose themselves in one another, learning hidden feelings and desires through every brush of lips, every touch of hands and fingers, and every word whispered between kisses. Eventually, both had lost count of how many times they had said, "I love you." Oh my god. Wow. Author's epilogue note. No lemon for you, at least not yet. I haven't decided. 2 guardians dead now? Aren't I just a beast? Plot devices and tragedy. Gotta love it. I hope I didn't make the situation transitions too fast. I try to write in a style that has a clearly defined but not specifically given time flow. I won't say, this happened for 10 minutes and then this happened for 12 minutes. Rather, I leave exact time in these scenarios ambiguous, so that you guys, the readers, can have more leeway in how fast or slow something happens, depending on your personal preferences. I'm sure there are some who want a pairing to hook up more quickly than others, and some who want a fluffy scene to be slow and sensual. To each their own, I've always said, and now I've given my readers that choice. I hope it worked, and will work in the future. Otherwise, I've got a jumbled time mess, which would be bad, :X. Till next time, all. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this little short story that sheds an insane amount of light on the personal relationships of the Zero series. Now, here at FDT, I'm constantly trying to think of new ways to improve your viewing experience, and have devised a rating system to use along with these readings. So without further ado, let's rate this amazing piece of literature with my patent-pending Creepometer. And the meter says 8! An astounding 8 on the Creepometer. That means that this fanfic is equivalent to having the Elephant Man stare in at you through your bedroom window while you sleep. Not bad, but it could be creepier. So let's give this author a big round of applause as we forget my bullshit review and read some of the 8 reviews that this Masterfic Classic, as I will call it, has from the good readers on fanfiction.net. First up, The Unknown. I see a story that can blossom beautifully here. Poor Harpuya, but it's Zero and Levi live. Then his last wish has not died in vain. Write soon. Zalmaveth writes, another Zero/Levi fic. Yay! I'm glad to see it becoming a little more popular, little by little. Fandom of the pairing aside, though, it's interesting to see it taking place after Z4. Much potential. I only know of 1 or 2 other fics doing that off the top of my head. On another slight fan moment for the Guardians, Harpuya! No! I'll admit I'm not a fan of them dying, since the rather oddly baffling retcon plot device of their death being a lead-up to ZX already does that, but to each their own in how they write. Really, I'm not angry or anything, though. Back on the chapter, though. Refuge in an ancient submarine with your enemy. I'm wondering how CL will handle it if she finds out, let alone how Leviathan will react to Zero if she suddenly wakes up and he's the first sight she sees. In any case, I'm looking forward to seeing how this continues. I can never get enough of Zero Levi stuff. Keep up the writing, I'm liking it so far. The Unknown write once again on Chapter 2. Finally, some action, and I wonder react to Zero and Levi hooking up. Write more soon. And once again, Zalmaveth writes, on Chapter 2, as expected, he's there to comfort her in a tragic moment. Poor Levy, both of her remaining brothers taken away. On a positive note, hooray! The hookup! I'm almost expecting them to get busted by the search party in a rather heated moment. Man, that'd be awkward. That almost makes me wonder if they'll tell CL if so. Or if they don't, will she catch on or be suspicious right away? I love it when fics make me wonder possible outcomes, keeps the excitement going. I have no opinion on Lemon. You're the author, it's your call. Anyway, I'm still loving the story and look forward to more soon. Keep up the good stuff. Out of 8 reviews, this has received all positive reviews. All. Everything. 8 people find this amazing. All I can say is wow. But that does it for this edition of FDT. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope now that you will join me for next episode, whatever it may be. Stay classy, ladies and gentlemen.